All right. Just quick FYI's update. So we have Friends and Family Day next Friday. Also, Chrissy gave an announcement about reimbursements. So if you've been expensing individual software subscriptions, those are no longer going to be reimbursed. So you can see the commit, and if there's any tool that are super necessary, check the process. There's no a process for opening an issue to have that approved, or at least tentatively approved for the whole department. My last FYI, I'll be out of office in June for 2 weeks. I created a coverage issue. It's a work in progress, but you can check there. And Valerie will be covering for me, but just a FYI, it's a bit far ahead, but just so you know. Yeah, Ian, if you want to voice your comment before I jump into the discussion items.
Yeah, I am back home after traveling for what feels like forever, so my schedule will go back to its normal cadence for anyone that was syncing with me. So things are back to normal-ish hours.
My first discussion item is also an announcement, but this time I need an action from you. If you haven't completed the survey yet, to review the current product design responsibilities, please do that before Friday. So Valerie wants to have all designers, all product designers replying to the survey and completing it. If you have any questions, let me know. Ian, you see you typing something?
I was just gonna read a checkbox, but my emoji keyboard is failing me, so I apologize.
Like, check. Mark down. All right, awesome. Then Ian.
Yeah, I just wanted to give everyone an update on the MR Witness project, which is a huge cross-stage collaboration effort that we're working on. We did an audit, thanks to everyone who made sure we had all of the relevant screenshots and copy and all of the stuff. We're going to work with the foundations team and the tech writing team to create patterns and standards. And then hopefully in a few weeks, we'll be reaching out again to all of the designers and say, hey, we have new standards. Can you review them and can you apply them? So I just want to give everyone an update. Over to Daniel. Who's next?
Thanks, Ian. Yeah, I wanted to share a quick update on a blocker that came up for the manual allow and deny deploy actions issue. So some of you may have seen I wrapped the solution validation to good results. Mostly the workflow was very understandable by the users. The entry point, not so much, but I would say the core of the design is succeeding in explaining to users how to allow or deny deploy. However, it was raised by one of the backend developers in the team that the way this flow is set up doesn't really match both the behavior of the operators that work with deploys today, but also the actual technical foundation of the merge request, right? There's a whole reason for that, but essentially the way things are set up in this design, with the approval being tied to the merge request, you could reject the deploy of one merge request, but then since the merge request is already merged, in the next one, if you approve it, you're also approving the code from the previous one that was removed, rejected, right? So it was a bit shocking to figure this out so late into solution validation, especially considering the validation was successful for the design itself and how it was the feature was done, but the feature was built on top of wrong assumptions, I would say. So at this moment, I'm going to have a sync meeting with Shinya tomorrow to better understand this use case and see how we can adapt the MVC with as little effort as possible to be implementable at a small step. But yeah, wanted to hear from you if you've faced this situation before, because for me, it's a bit frustrating. I spent one milestone designing this and another validating, only to now realize the problem space and the context wasn't very clear from the beginning. So I don't know. I feel it was a little bit of wasted effort, although we can still redirect it.
I'll voice my comment and I'll take notes. I think this is a shame, of course, Danielle, but I think also in particular with the release, where you're coming from so much transition. I can imagine that, for example, Shinya was not involved or there was no engineering looking to the problem validation phase with the PM. That's my assumption. And I think that's a good, well, a painful lesson learned, but at the same time, it shows how important it is for developers to be on top of the problems that we are validating and giving input on every step of the process. Um, please add me to that call because I have context as well for
Yeah.
for this, and I think I could be helpful to you and Shinya. But I think moving forward, make sure that UPM, engineering, of course, and designs are aligned in whatever validation that we do. And I'll pause now in case someone has hands-on first experience with something similar. And hello, next.
Yeah, I don't have experience specifically with deployments. I know barely anything about deployments, but it's just I'm very familiar with the problem of not getting the workflow right. I'm now kind of really trying to slow things down with the new feature that we're starting to work on. And it's been a bit of a struggle to get everyone involved in discussing the workflow specifically and hashing out all of those questions, because I feel like there's kind of this urgency to kind of move on to actually creating like a more specific solution. So like it happens all the time. So it sucks that it happened to you, but don't feel bad about it. It's like, I think it's just really important that we slow down and go back to the drawing board. So it's great that you at least learned about it. It would be much worse if everyone just moved forward with implementing this, which can also happen. I'm sure it's happened before. So, so is the problem that MRs are not part of the workflow? Is it what Shinya is saying?
So it is, so it's both, right? On one hand, operators, they don't really work that much on the merge requests. From the validation, like they are more familiar with the pipeline graph. But even so, pipeline and merge requests is not exactly where they work, which I don't think it's the biggest problem. I always knew the entry points were a stopgap into a more definitive solution in the future, likely in the environments page. But I think the main issue really is the fact that the approval, the way it works now, based on top of the merge request, doesn't really work on a technical level. And it was a huge surprise considering the amount of feedback that the discussion got from everyone, even Shinya, even other developers as well. Everyone was giving really good feedback in terms of how the solution should work and how the interaction should work. But the fact remains that the problem space and the context and the jobs to be done weren't really that well defined to begin with. So we were building on shaking ground essentially.
Yeah, I think this is a similar situation that Vidika, you just joined the call where we were talking about the solution validation that was done on top of like what Danielle just said, shaky jobs to be done, shaky assumptions Jesus Christ, from a technical perspective, and that makes me think of merge trains. So I think we were in a very similar situation. I was in a very similar situation with merge trains like over a year ago. And Vidika inherited all these problems of us starting to validate the solution with the problem not very well defined or the technicalities not very well documented for the feature. So Vidika, you don't have to voice anything, but I just wanted to say that, yeah, it makes me think now that it's a similar approach. And I think that the way that Vidika solved that problem by understanding the developer workflow and understanding and documenting that in the open can also be helpful, Daniel, for you to have conversations or at least keep a track of the decisions and the educators, the blockers for the technical part of this problem to communicate with your developers.
Yeah, for sure. We'll take a look into that. My feeling is that release as a whole is working very much on feature level and trying to find feature parity with other platforms. Like this has been stated before, right? We want feature parity with Spinnaker, that kind of thing. But I don't feel that we necessarily have a well-documented understanding of the user behavior and the jobs to be done, and all of that. So that definitely has to be improved.
Yeah, that sounds I'm not surprised. So a good challenge for you. But keep me in the loop, and I think add me to the call. I would love to be part of it and see because I work also with Senior for over a year. But
Yeah,
thanks for bringing that to the discussion.
thanks for all the feedback.
Yeah, so I have the next item. I'm actually going to share the board because it's going to be easier to illustrate what I'm currently working on. This is like the big thing that I'm working on, this milestone. So we're starting to look at creating an experience for large enterprise customers to create, maintain, and enforce libraries of custom CI/CD templates across all of the projects in their organization. So typically in a large organization, there's a central team that kind of maintains a library of CI/CD templates, and these are used as building blocks by developers and DevOps engineers in all of the projects to actually build pipelines out of those blocks. So based on all of the customer interviews that Dov and I have had with our large customers, and we will be following up with more interviews in the next weeks. So far, I've been identifying jobs to be done. And this board is just to kind of document the existing workflows. So this is like a typical workflow that a large enterprise organization has for setting something like that up. So the central platform team, they discuss the practices, a set of like practices, CI/CD practices that they want to follow. And then they create a shared library of pipeline and job components. They create a documentation hub, kind of like a GitLab handbook, basically. Just usually they have something like that internal. And then they, some of them use custom scripts, so others use third-party tools to enforce those pipelines across projects. So these scripts pull specific templates from the library, and they just inject them into pipelines in those projects. Let's say you want to make sure that all of your projects run specific kind of linter, or like code quality tests or accessibility and whatnot. So on the one hand, you want to enforce certain CI/CD practices just for the sake of maintaining some kind of standard and keeping everyone efficient. On the other hand, they also want to be compliant. So like GDPR compliant, for example, and there's all kinds of other compliance frameworks that large organizations need to make sure they follow specific rules, like they include certain things into their pipeline. And right now it's all kind of manual. And then when a new project is created and like new team members are onboarding, they learn about those best practices through the documentation, and then they have to actually go to like a separate project in their group where they can browse all of the different CI/CD templates, and they build their pipeline from those templates. And then if they forget to include something, the custom script that the central platform team wrote will send them notifications if their project isn't compliant. And some organizations even go as far as archiving those projects after a certain amount of time if they're still not compliant. So so this is kind of like what we've been learning on our end. And we recently learned that the compliance management team released a very similar feature that we knew nothing about that interacts with our stage. And we're now really trying to play catch up and collaborate closely on how we're going to make their feature play well with what we're building. So they're kind of solving a similar problem, but only focused on compliance management. So there's the compliance manager persona, Cameron, I think. And this person is mostly concerned with making sure that their organization passes the audit and that they're like GDPR compliant and some other compliance frameworks. They have to meet all of those needs. And they create a pipeline that runs in a separate project, and it attaches itself to the beginning of every other project pipeline if it has like the compliance label applied. So it creates like a whole wide range of things that we need to think about on the pipeline authoring side, because imagine you're in charge of creating a pipeline or like authoring a pipeline for your project, and you come to the pipeline editor and you write your configuration, and then you run the pipeline, and then you see that there's actually a compliance pipeline running in front of it, overriding some of the jobs you wrote, for example. So we're now collaborating on some things around surfacing the compliance pipeline inside the pipeline editor and things like that. And we're starting to look into what a better workflow would look like in GitLab for creating that library of shared templates, and how will it play with the compliance team? Because on the pipeline authoring team, like, I've never thought about the Cameron persona. I know nothing about compliance management. So reading through their direction was really eye-opening. So we will be doing more interviews to kind of fill the gaps in our understanding. Specifically, we need to learn how exactly in those large organizations the compliance team collaborates with like the central CI/CD team, like the team that actually writes the pipeline configuration. How do they communicate and things like that? So yeah, that's what's on my plate.
That was awesome, Nadia. Thank you for, sorry, Ian. Thank you for sharing that. Now, Ian, go ahead. Sorry for interrupting you.
Yes, thank you so much for sharing. And I wrote a comment in the agenda, and then I lost Zoom and couldn't learn how to unmute because we've only been doing this for a few years. It's interesting that you bring up this conversation of how those large organizations are functioning, because a lot of the questions you seem to be asking based on the board and what you just described aligns with what we're about to investigate on package, which is how do those non-developer high up people looking at organizing an organization worth of stuff want to manage packages? How do they want to set up the configurations? And so not only do I think we have an intersect to explore in terms of how do we create pipeline authoring patterns so that organizations can use registries, there's an intersection there we could explore, but just the larger idea of how do we take our project group and possibly workspace organization and make it work for the top level down on how they want to create patterns in the organization. So I would really like to hear the results of the research and conversations you have coming up.
Yeah, actually, regarding package, I will need to reach out to you to learn more about package registries, because there is now, well, actually, we're collaborating with Shinya on it. He came up with this big proposal for leveraging package registries to create these custom template libraries. So apparently, I have no idea how exactly it works, even though I spent 1 hour on a call with him. He was really trying to explain it to me, but maybe you can shed some light on it. So if you have like a link to a good walkthrough for package registry setup in GitLab, that would be super helpful, because I had a look at the documentation, but it would be helpful to have like a step-by-step kind of UI walkthrough.
For sure. Let me see what I can come up with, and we will sync on that.
Cool, thanks.
Just a very quick comment, Nadia. Thanks for sharing this. And me coming recently from a large organization that used GitLab, what you described really matches my experience there. With they were starting to have a central team that was going to own like Node.js pipelines. So they were doing the legwork by themselves to have these templates and really build this ownership model across the organization. And I think that's something different groups at GitLab can do much better in terms of supporting shared ownership across large organizations, right? Who owns pipelines, who owns packages? Either it's small teams or a centralized team, but sometimes organizations are shifting from one model to the other. And yeah, our product can do a much better job supporting that.
I wonder if we have an opportunity to take the learnings from these couple different initiatives and push them out to the larger organization afterwards of, this is how we learned large organizations want to organize themselves, especially when packages tend to exist outside of individual projects or individual workflows. And pipeline authoring is something that organizations, from what I've heard, want consistency in patterns. It would be cool to be able to turn around and say, hey, organization, this is how these specific personas want to handle large groups. And maybe we could take a lead on changing that. Because I've heard that feedback similar to what Daniel said of, once you start to get large and trying to organize, GitLab starts to become more frustrating to work with.
Yeah, I think we all have insights and findings on that. Also in testing runner, we were talking about enterprise management, personas, and release management as well. So I know that some of you inherited some research and findings. That's a good one, Ian. Would you like to take a stab at it and see how we can collect that? Just create like an epic or something where we can feed that information.
We certainly could. My first reaction was to wait as Nadia kind of has the first bout of research focused on this, so that there is data and then there's something we can add to, would be a little better than just an amorphous kind of, maybe not amorphous, a nebulous place that doesn't actually have any structure to it yet, would make it hard to collaborate on.
Yeah, so right now, Austin from the compliance management team, will be collaborating on these workflows that I just showed you. And I think once we have that, we can kind of build upon it. I think it would be really cool to kind of see all of those workflows in one place, because I definitely see a pattern emerging that in a large organization, there are separate departments kind of managing these things, and they just have a separate project that runs their pipeline, like the compliance pipeline, or like a project with all of the different CI/CD templates. And then they can kind of feed all of those resources to all of the other projects within the organization, and the projects can contribute upstream. So anyone can open an issue in like the compliance project or the CI/CD templates project, for example, and make some suggestions. So they don't exist in a silo, but there's definitely this, I think compliance management calls this separation of duty or separation of responsibility. If I will share a link to the compliance management category direction, because it's like a concept they refer to a lot, and it's something that large organizations are just trying to achieve. They want separation of duties, and they want to be able to like allow teams downstream to just do their work without worrying about the things that have been set up for them, kind of. So yeah, I will let you know once the workflows are defined for compliance management and pipeline authoring, and then I'll share the project with you, so maybe we can kind of add on to it from the package perspective.
Awesome. We're almost at time, so keeping to Deepika's point.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm a little zoned out, so I wasn't able to comment on most of the things, but Nadia, I really liked what you're doing. Okay, so in CI, we are facing some unanticipated, like non-anticipated problems. So there was this issue, which you will find that is placed under the issue 1 subset of. If you go to that, it has a history, like it was open long back. I remember attending a meeting with the customer and Tao, and where the customer was explaining what kind of problem they are facing, but how they explained it. And given what the kind of knowledge that I had about this whole stage group at that point of time, I took their words for it, and I provided a design which was, it was a very reactive design, like, okay, you want this change? All right, we'll provide something of this sort. And the whole team agreed on it, and it just went on. It was delayed because there was a lot of backend blockers that we were facing in the process. And finally, I think it was this milestone which has just passed when the backend work had started, and Alison asked a couple of questions, and that pushed me into a black hole. So I wasn't able to sleep. So I realized that we have missed a very crucial piece of information. And I was very hesitant that, oh my God, if I bring this up, like we'll be taking 10 steps back into this very important problem that we are trying to solve here. But so the first thing I did was I did kind of notify everyone on the GCI that I think we are doing something wrong here. And Alison has pointed out a problem that is much deeper than what we see on the surface. Then I had a call with Marcel. I made him go through, like he also volunteered to go through all the possible use cases in AMR in pipeline widgets. And then I was able to convince him like we have a really big problem, like what we are calling that user said that they are able to see a merge immediately button when when merge trains are enabled and pipeline must succeed is enabled, and we were just not able to wrap our head around it, like what's happening there. It turned out that what we were calling merge immediately was not merge immediately. It was something else, but it was appearing as a different button. So now, yesterday, the whole proposal was flipped over. I went to also spoke to Jackie, like, what should I be doing in such a situation? Because what I'm going to propose, it's really going to, I mean, in my opinion, it was all the work that was done on that issue would go to waste. But I have the support of the team, and the team is also coming up with like really good ideas. So we're just changing the proposal here, and I just created 3 issues that I'll be adding to an epic. So yeah, fingers crossed from here. And similarly, we also had this issue too, which is listed here, which was again a very old issue. And since this was old and it demanded a lot of changes in the different states of the widget, I went ahead and tried each one of them. It was tedious, but I found that most of them are not even valid. And in fact, the proposal that was kind of divided between states could be combined. So I went ahead and did that as well. So most of the proposals are now new and ready to be acted upon. And we are planning that if we are not able to accommodate those things in this quarter, we'll probably create a new KR altogether to address all the MR widget usability issues in the upcoming quarter. And this was a little scary experience for me because I learned a lot, but I don't know. I felt that I felt like I was seeing the tip of the iceberg, and I was not able to account for what's underneath. And there's a lot underneath. And now I have much more knowledge about what's happening in the MR widget and how many billions of stages we have, states we have there, and what's going on, like what are the different points where these states evolve and so on. So yeah, this was interesting, but this led to something else as well. So I have created this group with different projects, and each project is actually focusing on a different use case. For example, each project which is listed in this group has a different setting, which has been enabled. And so if anyone wants to just go ahead and take a screenshot or a snapshot of what kind of widgets appear in, well, let's say when pipeline must succeed and merge result pipeline is enabled, they can just click on that particular project, go to the MRs which are open and take a screenshot. So I try to make it easier for everyone because we are having to do this very often, and it was just not making any sense creating a new project every time this was required. So yeah, this is one.
Vinica, before you jump into your next point, I think I just want to voice what's in my head. I think it's what you just shared now about the challenges and breaking, seeing that there's a problem in your case was already in production, right? It was already implemented. I think it relates to what Daniel was talking about, the validation, right? I think it points to the importance of breaking things down to the smallest chunk possible. I think with PI you also had that without and you're both learning, right, about the technicalities. That's why, and I'm telling you this because I know I felt in my skin when I was working on merge trains. We need to break things down, and we need to cover edge cases and document and have these tough conversations with developers sooner than later, and over communicate. So I really appreciate that you both brought these examples of not so happy endings or happy stories and the real challenges that we face here. But it shows how it's crucial that we understand the technology as well, right? That's why in the UX, the product designer role, the first item is understand the technology, understand the product area you are assigned to. So I'm happy that you both share these examples, and I think it's also an opportunity for you to maybe collaborate and start talking about, how you're solving these problems in the two different age groups, and yeah, just learn together and reach out to other teams where, for example, there is a higher maturity in terms of research. So I think Daniel, for example, can learn a lot from Jackie, right? And then Vidika can share those learnings. And at the same time, Vidika can talk about how you're breaking down problems and documenting your technical issues and show that to Daniel. So just want to voice that because I think you both brought up very good points today.
Thanks. Okay, so I think because we're already over time, could I go to the next point? Is it fine with everyone?
Yeah, go quickly.
Okay, so yeah, so there's this project that has the notes from the BAD conference that we attended, me and Nadia. And I mean, I later realized after I was watching, I watched the recordings that it actually had a lot of good insights. And I figured that there are certain behavioral change templates and techniques which already exist, and they are actually very complex to handle. And I saw in one of the talks where they talked about how you could club those techniques with the day-to-day process. For example, in journey maps, in opportunity mapping, like taking some parts of the behavioral technique mapping and then putting that over your usual processes, creating a hybrid process out of that. That's something that we can definitely try to do. And in fact, I would definitely try to use this the next time I analyze something and share with the team. But yeah, if you go to this project where the notes are there, I've also put a lot of resources which were shared in the slides by the speakers, just to make it easy for everyone to reference them. And we can all use them in our own creative ways. That was my takeaway, which I haven't typed out yet. And the last one, which is read only, is the UX scorecard. We are about to start off with the interviews next week, and it's progressing well. It was again a very technical thing that we are going to try this time, which is passing variables between upstream and downstream. And I feel that besides kind of evaluating this particular use case of passing variables, it also would help us validate a few things about upstream and downstream. Maybe I wouldn't analyze them directly, but I will definitely pass on the information to Nadia so that she could also use that in whichever way she wants. Yeah, and that is it by me.
Very, very fast. Well, thank you so much. We are over time. If you have any questions, please reach out in the channel. And thanks everyone for joining. This was really really useful, really helpful. Before the thing.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Exactly.
Yeah, bye.